more the trivia of the matter that is at stake here. Shall I let you keep looking, or
No, you go ahead.
the electromotive force?
Motive force. But now it just stands for EMF, right?
That is correct. And why? Does it stand for EMF and not electromotive force anymore?
Because it is technically not force.
Yes, that is correct. It's a voltage. It causes, in the right situation, it will cause charges to move, but it is not a force. It does not have units of Newton, so it should not be called a force. But because of historical reasons, they just still call it the EMF. Some textbooks will say that stands for electromotive force, but really, that's how it came into being, but that's not really what it stands for anymore. So the electromotive force is somehow related to the change in the magnetic flux with respect to time. Now, there's a gap right here in front, which I will fill in a moment. Realize that as soon as I create a current in this, it's going to create its own magnetic field. So I create a current in this by making the connection. I create a current in this, which would create a magnetic field. Now I have a magnetic field here. That magnetic field would cause a change here in the magnetic flux over here. So we end up with a situation, one of two things is going to happen. It's going to create a magnetic field which causes this current to get bigger, or it's going to create a magnetic field or magnetic flux that's going to make this current get weaker. It is always the one that's not free energy. If it made it bigger, that means that this current, current starts at 0, you make the connection, you create a current, you create a magnetic field, which creates a magnetic flux. If that current created over here made this current stronger, then we'd get an additional change in the magnetic flux, making that even stronger, and suddenly you get this runaway power. And probably, as a species, we would no longer exist. Actually, I suspect that as a species, we never would have been created. So what happens is that the current that is induced is going to oppose the change. So if I create a magnetic flux if my magnetic field is going this way, then the current that is created is going to be traveling clockwise to create a magnetic field going in the opposite direction of the external magnetic field here, so that it reduces how big this gets. That is represented mathematically by a minus sign. Application of the minus sign we will actually do at some point, but it's easier just to think through it and going, all right, I'm not going to get runaway power, so which way will the current be induced? Now this voltage over there, what is the relationship between voltage and electric field? Let's say if it's a uniform electric field, what's the relationship between the electric field and voltage? Uniform electric field, take capacitors if you need to.
What's the question?
What is the relationship between voltage and the electric field? This has been material for test 1A.
Is it the Ed equation?
Yes. If the electric field is constant, then the voltage, or if we just think through the signs, the Ed equation. So, since I have a voltage over there, an ideal one, and I know it's related to the electric field, well, if the electric field is constant, then I can just use E dot delta X. But if, oh, that's what I want. But if it's not constant, then I'm basically doing a sum. So this is going to be equal to the sum around some closed loop E dot delta L. The calculus form of it is just a quick aside. That's the calculus form of it. All right, so we need to give it a name, of course, and we usually name it after the person who comes up with it. This is known as Faraday's law. However, Faraday did a more conceptual approach to it. He didn't actually formulate the math as best as I can tell. And the person who did the math is a guy named Lentz. So probably Faraday-Lentz's law. But most textbooks will just call it Faraday's law. And they give credit to Lentz for the negative sign. Also, the best I can tell, there was a certain amount of working independently of each other. I feel like Lentz just got the shafted over it. So let's see where we are. We started out with Coulomb's law, but that's not fancy enough. So we manipulated a whole bunch, and we come out with Gauss's law of electricity. So if I have a Gaussian sphere, if I look at the electric field times the area vector around the whole thing, I end up with the enclosed charge over epsilon sub naught, assuming it's in free space. And so this is Gauss's, or Gauss' law of electricity. And it's because I can have a single charge, it's not equal to zero. It is possible to have a single charge and then electric field going out or coming in. If we dealt with a magnetic field, or the magnetic flux, and this is just the electric flux through a closed surface. If we dealt with the magnetic flux through a closed surface, E dot delta A, that's going to be equal to zero. Because you cannot have just a monopole, I'll potentially contradict myself in a moment. We can't have just the monopole. We've got a north pole, we've got a south pole, they go together. Give a moment for people to catch up, and then I'll explain why I might contradict myself. Now, is it possible to have a north pole without a south pole? Yes and no. There are some physicists who are searching for the magnetic monopole. They feel like there's enough symmetry between electricity and magnetism that if we can have a single charge, we can have a single pole. quantum physics does allow for there to be a north pole that appears to be by itself, but it's connected to a south pole somewhere. So I could have a north pole here, and it looks like it's all by itself, but it is somehow connected to a south pole somewhere else. So quantum physics allows this. So they're searching for a north pole or just a south pole, where the other pole is somewhere else. And they have not found it. There are some who believe it enough that they were spending their careers trying to find it. And when I was in grad school, there was this story, and I don't know if it's true or not. It was funny as a grad student, less funny now, where some grad students decided to play a practical joke on their professor who was looking for it, and they faked the data so that he would think he found it. It was revealed before it got too far.
That's painful.
That was, yeah, that's a cruelty joke. So again, funnier as a grad student than as an instructor. We next, so this is Gauss's law of magnetism. We next, so that's E dot A and B dot A. So we also have a B dot length, so the sum around some loop there, and we use this in order to look at the magnetic field coming from the center of the solenoid, B dot L, and that's going to be equal to U naught times the current enclosed. So the first area, we're dealing with a three-dimensional surface. Here we're dealing with just a wire that connects up with itself, or some line that connects up with itself. And E and C for enclosed. This is Ampere's law. And that's the one that we're going to need to make a correction to at some point. And then now we have, I can draw a sigma there. The electric field dot delta L is negative change in the magnetic flux over the change in time. And this is Faraday's law, or as Faraday-Lentz's law. This is most of Maxwell's equations. At this point, there's a strong urge to just run forward along this line of thinking and get to relativity as soon as possible, because relativity is great. It prompts people when they're first exposed to it to go, what? Wait, what? That can't be right. However, I need to reel myself back in, and let's explore Faraday's law, a little bit Faraday-Lentz's law, a little bit more, before we get to Maxwell's contribution and what he did with it, to the point where why anyone would call these Maxwell's equations when almost all of them are done and Maxwell's not involved yet. The key is what Maxwell did with it. This is a wire. These dots are representing a magnetic field coming out of the board. I used to have a way of doing that with chalk much more easily, but not as easy on the marker. All right. This is supposed to represent a magnetic field coming out of the board. They're all supposed to be dots. Some of them obviously look like dashes. I'm not going back and redo those. We'll set up a coordinate system here. I hat, J hat, K hat. So the magnetic field is in the K hat direction. This length right here, we will call L. These other two wires go on farther than we need to know about. All right, questions about what this is supposed to represent? Now on top of this, I am going to place a wire that's just sitting on top of the, what I refer to in some problems as the U-shaped wire. So right now, I have absolutely no current running through this. Because the magnetic flux that's coming through is not changing. Magnetic flux, magnetic field, no, it's the magnetic flux. The magnetic flux is not changing, so I'm not creating the EMF to create a current. This distance here, we'll label as W.
Or width.
We're getting close to the Princess Bride reference. How many of you have seen the Princess Bride? And why is it only 1.5 people?
Shoot.
There are certain films that everyone should see. Everyone should see The Princess Bride. If you've ever watched Honest Trailers, where they rip apart every movie, the Honest Trailers for Princess Bride is, he starts to go into it and he says, no, it's a great film.
It's a great film.
I think it's the only film that I've seen an honest trailer for where he could not badmouth it. Or you were saying?
I can't remember the 1.5, but I remember like everything else. Oh. No, I can't remember 1.5, but I remember everything else from the movie.
The 1.5 was the fact that Stephanie was given she might have seen it. So.
Oh, okay.
I saw it when I was really young.
I had a student a couple of years ago who saw it, and there was the scene with the swamp rats. Or swamp beetles,
ROUSs?
that she loved animals so much that it just bothered her. That
The rodents of unusual size?
Yes. Thank you. I need to watch it again. Anyway, I'm gonna make a reference. Apparently, Laura might understand it, the rest of you, later on when you watch the film, and should watch the film. Such an awesome film. When you watch it, you'll go, oh, that's what he was talking about.
Yes, of course.
So now I'm gonna take this wire, back to physics, and I am going to move the wire to the right at a speed v. And what I want to figure out is what is the voltage that is produced across that wire. So first, conceptually, I know the magnetic flux is equal to the magnetic field times the area. So my magnetic flux, currently, when I start out, my magnetic flux is going to be the magnetic field times doing a dot product with the area vector, which I'll just go ahead and make it in the same direction, times LW. Magnetic field times the area, that's my magnetic flux. And quick flashback, what are the units of magnetic flux, the SI units of magnetic flux?
Farad?
Farad, that's units of capacitance.
Hmm.
What are the SI units of magnetic field?
Hmm.
Millimeter?
That would
Wait,
be energy.
no.
Word mark.
That's other Webers,
Magnetic flux is Weber.
yeah,
Magnetic field,
the T.
yes, Tesla.
Hmm.
Area, SI units in area.
Meters squared.
Okay, so Tesla meter squared would be acceptable, but a Tesla meter squared is also a Weber.
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 W-E-B-E-R, I think there's only one B in Weber. I did something with it. All right, so I have a magnetic flux. As this wire moves out to the right, what happens to the magnetic flux?
It gets bigger.
Okay,
Mhm.
since the magnetic flux gets bigger, we have a change in the magnetic flux with respect to time. I'm going to produce an EMF, a voltage, which will cause current to flow. So as this wire moves out to the right, well, the direction of the the direction of the current that is induced, well, this moves out this way, it increases the magnetic flux, and nature says,